it's interesting hearing you talking about your dad. I mean, your bio father.
Oh,
And Grandma was married several times?
yeah, she was married to Lee, my real dad, and then she was married to a guy by the name of Bill Bailey. And he was just a playboy. I mean, the guy had no responsibility. He was a really nice guy, but he had no responsibilities at all in life. And she was only married to him for about a year. And then she ultimately married Bill. But thank God for Bill. That's all I can say.
I think we can all say that.
Yeah.
Well, he had so many things that he told me that were such truisms that I've lived with all my life. Like, always pay more than your share. Nobody will ever remember. But if you don't,
Nobody will ever forget.
and like one time we were in a restaurant and something wasn't right, and I started to give the waitress some crap about it. He said, "Don't ever do that. Call the manager." She just worked him, but he was. I think the thing is amazing. He did what he didn't have to do. That makes it more special. But he and I were like that. We were really buddies. We never did anything together. One time I can remember we went to drag racing. It's the only time he and I ever did anything fun. But when we had the harvesters, you know, we had a .22 pistol, and we'd go out and sleep in the fields with the harvesters to protect them for vandals. And those were big nights, you know. And I worked on the harvesters. I didn't really work. I was on the harvesters. And it's really filthy, dirty work. And you wear goggles and you get all dirty and you're a mess. But to go into the restaurants with the guys, you felt like it's really important. I'm sorry.
What was he like before he got sick? I mean, I never heard his voice when it wasn't stricken by Parkinson's. What did he sound like? What, you know?
Oh, he was a powerful man. And it wasn't a deep booming voice, but he had a powerful voice. But I remember one time there was a kid by the name of Johnny Coletti who was dating my sister. And you know Bill, when he was a barrel of a man. Johnny Coletti's over at our house one day, in the old house. He's bouncing around. "Come on, Bill, let's go a couple rounds. Let's go a couple rounds." Bill picked him up and pressed him up against the ceiling. This kid was about 6'1", about 180, you know. And one time he didn't take any crap off anybody, although he wasn't a fighter. But I know one time a trucker nearly ran us off the road down around Turlock. We came up to the stoplight, and Bill got out of the car and pulled that guy out of that truck and just shook the hell out of him. Whoa! And he did the same thing. Some kid was calling my sister bad names and stuff and really insulting her when she was in high school. His name was Bobby Hahn. He was just a little asshole. And Bill had a ruptured blood vein in his eye, so his eye was all red, you know. He looked tough. Anyway, he grabbed this kid. Saw my sister said, "That's him on that bike over there." And he went over and scared the shit out of that kid. He never said another word about my sister. But he didn't like Charlotte.
Really?
Well, for years, and Charlotte didn't like him.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason was, of course, my mother was quite a seamstress, and she made all my sister's clothes, and he would walk into her. It'll ring just a second. It'll ring through once more, I think. he would walk into her closet, into Charlotte's closet, and just tons of clothes. And, he would just shake his head like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. And my sister was going to dances, and he didn't approve of it. But my mother would let her sneak out and give her money to go places. And then, of course, he'd find out, and all hell would break loose. And I always found with Bill, just like when my mom came home and he had me marching with that rifle for 4 hours, she interceded, and I said, no, this is between he and I. It goes much smoother this way.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way with money. Like when I was going to school, I didn't have to. When I was going to school, I didn't have to work after school as long as I was studying. But every now and then he'd say, and we weren't rich, but every now and then he'd give me $50. But he wouldn't give me any more. I mean that would, you didn't know if you'd ever get another $50 or $5. But the next day he might say, Doc, here's $50. So, well, you gave me $50. I said, well, it's not bad to have a little money in your pocket. But there might be again. But anytime I ask him for something straight up between he and I, that wasn't a problem. But my sister and he just clashed because my mother was it was an interloper, and he hated that. Later on, my sister and he became very fond of each other. She took care of him with my mom.
Right.
But she also changed. I mean, she matured over the years. And the other thing that she had a lot of, she was married to this guy in the Army, Joe Armstrong. And he came from a very wealthy family, and she had a 47 Cadillac convertible. It was a beautiful car. But she hung out with a bunch of black guys and black kids, and Bill did not like that. He wasn't. I think he might have been a bit of a racist, even though he was dark skinned. And he'd come home and tell my mom, Charlotte's car is over at such. And her husband was overseas. I saw him over at this guy's place, and she doesn't belong over there with all those niggers. And it was. Well, that's the time of day, and and I also found it like when Christmas for us, we didn't get anything for Christmas. I mean, you got socks, handkerchiefs. Except my sister would get cashmere sweaters, but and then they always went to the Shimons, where everybody spoke Persian, and Charlotte and I didn't fit in there at all. So on Christmas they would go to the Shimons and Charlotte and I would go to the Strand Theater, and in those days they had double features and cartoons and the Path News, but that's why Christmas has always been special to me.
What do you know about how Bill was raised and brought up and whereabouts?
He was born in Persia, now Iran, and his father was an Episcopalian bishop. Believe it or not, he wasn't a Muslim. And Bill was like 4 or 5 years old when they escaped from Iran, and they literally walked across Russia. And when they wound up in New York City, all that they had was his dad's name was Paul. Paul had on his robes, and he'd sewn gold into the robes, and that's all that they had in New York City. And then his dad married a woman, a real bitch, the boys called her Sweetie Pie because she was so mean that. And because of her, they put them both in military school. So Bill, from the time he was in grammar school all the way through high school, he went to military school. And he never went to college. But when he first came to Modesto, he taught trigonometry at Modesto JC, and he never had a course in trigonometry. I mean, but he learned it in the Encyclopedia Britannica. And he was he was a real disciplinarian. When I first got to Modesto, my sister and I are lying on the floor. Mom, would you make some hot chocolate? You get up and make your own hot chocolate. Your mother's got enough to do. And but he wasn't ornery. He wasn't mean at all. But if you ask him, Bill, may I go to such and such? May I do such and such? No. The answer was no. And if you argued, well, everybody else is going. Da 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 da. And no, there was no compromise. The answer was no. And I learned that. My sister didn't. That at least in her early years. But no, there was one time you mentioned Bill. Like my sister and I were at foster homes because my mom couldn't afford us, and I remember we lived in this one place. It was a widow lady. Her name was Mrs. Loader, and her husband had been a clockmaker from Germany, and he had all these cuckoo clocks. And like at midnight, cuckoo, 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 all these clocks going off all around the house, and she sold them. That's the way she made a living, was all the stuff that he made before. But she was so cheap that we only got one piece of toilet paper. That's all you could use. And we had mostly rice, and it was rice pudding, fried rice, boiled rice, you name it. Anything made with rice is what we ate. And we had boiled something terrible all over our bodies because of nutritional, I guess it was nutritional. I remember having one at the base of my rectum and squatting over a thing while they punctured it. And God, the pain. But, and then I went to live with my Uncle Fairbanks. He had 7 kids. He was a building contractor. He built a lot of stars houses during the 30s, and he wasn't poor, but he wasn't rich with 7 kids. But then my sister and I went to live with him. And then on Saturdays, my mother would always come by, and she'd have one package of Mother's cupcakes, and she'd take us for a walk, and because she couldn't afford cupcakes for everybody.
Go figure.
All those things did me, I think, served me well, though. It's just like one of the things I found out I didn't like to work. I didn't like physical labor. And while I was in the Navy, I'd planned on going back to school, and I had 2 years of college, and because I had 2 years of college, I had every posh job in the Navy because I could read, write, and chew gum, and all these officers learned that they could rely on me to become, like when I was in boot camp, I was in the color guard, and that was really kind of special because I had a bicycle, and when you're in boot camp, you can't go anywhere without a walking chit. Well, because I was in the color guard, I had a permanent walking chit. I could get on my bicycle, and the store was called the Geeduk Stand, where you get hot dogs and candy bars and all that kind of stuff, pokey bait, and so the other guys would pay me to take my bicycle down and get contraband that they couldn't get themselves. But then in Hawaii, I went back to Hickam Field. I served my 2 years at Hickam, oddly, and I was an aviation machinist mate. And again, here I'm 19 years old, and third-class petty officer, and I'm in charge of the flight line of Super Connies. I had 16 Super Connies that I was responsible for. And one of my jobs was to taxi the planes over that were leaving from, they'd leave then from Honolulu International, which is also part of Hickam. And you can't think how important you are when you're 19 years old. You taxi this. I wouldn't let these guys in my car, much less the airplane. But I discovered I didn't like working from 12 o'clock to 4. And I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to go to Cal. So I went over to Cal, and I enrolled. And I was accepted.
When was this?
I got out of the Navy in 56. In 56. I was admitted to Cal, but I wanted to go to law school. And that was from Charlie Black, who urged me to go to law school. And I thought, 2 more years of college and 3 more years of law school, that's 5 years. And because I only had 2 years of foreign language, I had to take more foreign language, which I could not master foreign language. And that was in high school. I could either take 3rd year Spanish or, German or French or something. I just couldn't bear the thought of doing it. So I went back to Modesto JC. Charlie was still there, and he was a counselor. He'd been my counselor. I remember during the war, now I'm regressing for a moment. These veterans, they were all over 21, so at lunchtime we'd often go and have a couple beers for lunch. And I'd be in his class, I'm dozing. I says, "Well, I see Mr. Waddell's been to the malt shop." So we'll pass on him, Well, I went to see him, and I said, I enrolled in Hastings, and I've enrolled in Cal, and I was accepted at Hastings, but they said, we don't like special students. We want people only with degrees, so you will not make it. And that was their attitude. And I said, Jesus. Plus you have to live in San Francisco. And Charlie said, well, there's this nice little law school in Sacramento. You might go up there and talk to them. Well, they welcomed me with open arms. Number one, I was a vet. I had an income. I had a stipend from the military to go back to school. And it was because of Charlie I wound up at McGeorge. And we started off with a class of 64. And of the original 64, 8 graduated.
Wow.
Our graduating class had 16 in it. People who transferred in from other schools. And when I took the bar, all 8 of the original passed the bar. And all 8 of the others did not. Which was incredible. Yeah, McGeorge had the highest pass rate in the state. And I remember I was now a lawyer, and I was down in San Francisco, and I was with Dean Shaver and the dean of Stanford. And our rooms were next door. The alumni rooms were next to each other. And the dean of Stanford was telling Gordon, he says, you have a nice little law school up there in Sacramento, but you ought to really use more on academics and not so much on preparing people for the bar. And we were number 1 on the bar for about 5 years in a row, which is tough. And so this one year I'm with him, and Stanford beat us. They were 98%, and I think we had a couple failures. And Gordon Shaver says, you have a nice little law school down there at Palo Alto, but you got to do more with academics and not so much on passing the bar. Yeah, law school that was a tough time too. Your mother and I were very poor. Well, we were very poor everywhere we were. About the only place we could really live was Oklahoma. When I was in the Navy there. And that guy in Oklahoma, we had an apartment. And we came home for 2 weeks, Christmas leave. And we come back, and I go up to pay the rent, and he's only charged me for 2 weeks. He said, well, you weren't here. I can't charge you for you weren't here. So he only collected 2 weeks rent.
That's a good guy.
And I loved Oklahoma. I really did. The people there were so nice. And it was, very inexpensive compared to living. When we got to Hawaii, I had a job at Waikiki Shell Service Station. And the job I had in the Navy, I went to work at 3:30 at night and got off at 7:30 in the morning. And then I was off for 2.5 days. And then Saturday I'd go in at 8 in the morning and work till Sunday morning. The same way with Sunday, you work 24 hours. So I had a job at Waikiki Shell Service Station, and I hate to say it, I was getting 90 cents an hour there. And we could park 55 cars in our parking, and there was a big restaurant called Laoi Chai's, Chinese restaurant. And to the Chinese, the 1st, the 11th, the 21st, 31st are all lucky days. So we'd have weddings, and there might be 2 or 3 weddings. We might fill that parking lot up 3 or 4 times over a period of a day, and it was $1 to park your car. And I was the manager of the service station, and Fred, the owner, the minute I got there, he'd take off. And then, like the next day, I'm coming in, he says, we were $4 short last night, Bill. Fred, I know there's a calculator on that cash register. If I'm going to take the money, I'm never going to put it in the cash register and take it out. So when we entered the parking, a lot of times we'd put $20, $30 in there and wouldn't ring it up. We were $30 over, yes, but he's not paying taxes on that $30. But I will tell you, there were many times that not every dollar got into the cash register or to Fred. And your mother and I'd get off work, usually about 10 o'clock at night at the service station. And there was a place called Cow Cow Corner. It was a big drive-in restaurant. We'd go down there and have onion rings and hamburgers. Oh my, that was such a treat.
And Wendy was born in, well, hang on, let's start that conversation in a second.
About 5